Ever heard that saying, never meet your heroes? It's like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, imagine that feeling, but like 10 times worse.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of what we're diving into
Yeah.
today. A story that's sending shockwaves through the Church of England.
Right.
We're talking about Soul Survivor.
Okay.
You familiar?
Yeah. I know Soul Survivor. Big youth ministry, right?
Huge. Been a cornerstone for generations of Christians, not just in the UK, but like globally.
Yeah. I mean, what makes it so impactful, so relevant, is that it's not just like about this one organization, right?
Right.
It's about power, faith, trust, things that are supposed to be like sacred.
You hit the nail on the head. Our main source today is this independent review into Soul Survivor. Just came out this week, actually. September 26th, 2024. And let me tell you, this thing reads more like a thriller than a church document. Heavy stuff.
Wow. It sounds intense.
It is.
So it sounds like it's not holding back.
Not at all. It's digging deep, not just into the allegations themselves,
Right.
but the culture that allowed this stuff to go on for, it seems, way too long.
I see.
So for our listeners who might not know Soul Survivor,
Yeah.
imagine like those massive music festivals,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of people, but with a faith focus aimed at young people. That's Soul Survivor in a nutshell.
Okay, so huge, influential, I get it.
Exactly. For decades.
Wow. So when these allegations came out against Mike Pilavachi,
Yeah.
the leader,
Longtime leader.
right, longtime leader, it's no wonder it shook the entire church. I mean, this wasn't just a local thing, right?
Oh, no.
This is a big deal.
This was like a bomb going off.
I see.
So let's get into these allegations.
Okay.
The report breaks them down into 4 main areas of concern.
Okay.
First up, this thing they call ghosting.
Ghosting. Okay, so we're not talking about like dating apps here, right?
No. But kind of similar. Imagine someone you look up to, someone you've put your heart and soul into connecting with,
Right.
just cuts you off.
Oh, wow.
No explanation, no closure, just gone.
That's rough.
That's essentially what people close to Pilavachi described.
And we're talking like people deeply involved in Soul Survivor.
Deeply. Many in leadership positions or like hoping to be.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is.
Yeah.
To have that kind of connection just severed.
Yeah.
Devastating. The report really emphasizes the emotional toll it took. Betrayal, self-doubt.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking. And this ghosting thing seems to tie into the second major concern, controlling behavior.
Okay, so how does that work?
Well, the review says Pilavachi used this intense connection, followed by isolation, to control people.
Oh, wow. Like a power play almost.
Exactly. People felt pressured to agree with him, even on small stuff, just out of fear of being, well, ghosted.
It's like walking on eggshells all the time.
Yeah.
You never know what might set him off.
Exactly. And who's going to challenge the leader when the stakes are that high, right?
Right.
Right.
It makes you wonder what else might have been going on that people were too afraid to speak up about.
It's a chilling thought. And sadly, it brings us to the most serious allegations. Inappropriate physical contact.
Okay, this is where it gets really heavy.
We're talking about wrestling, massages, things that just crossed a line, especially given the power dynamics at play.
Yeah, I mean, you've got young people looking up to this figure, maybe even idolizing him.
Totally. And feeling pressured to engage in this physical contact, that's a nightmare.
The report mentions multiple people coming forward with these kinds of stories. It
Yep.
wasn't just an isolated incident.
Exactly. And on top of all of this, there are instances of safeguarding failures within the organization. Like one that really stuck with me involves Matt Redman.
The musician.
Yeah, the musician. He was super involved with Soul Survivor early on. Turns out he was a victim of sexual abuse as a teenager.
Oh, it's awful.
It is. And while the report doesn't directly connect Pilavachi to the abuse, they do criticize Soul Survivor's leadership
Okay.
for not reporting it to the authorities. They knew about it and did nothing.
Wow. So we're seeing a pattern here. Allegations of inappropriate behavior and then this lack of action, even when serious concerns were raised.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so disturbing. It seems like there were so many missed opportunities to stop this.
So where do we go from here? What's next for Soul Survivor, for the Church of England?
Well, the review doesn't just lay out the problems, thankfully. There are concrete recommendations in there, not just for Soul Survivor, but for the wider church.
Okay, so there's hope for real change.
We'll dive into all of that in part 2 of our deep dive. So we've laid out some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah,
And as you said, the review doesn't just stop at the what happened.
right.
It digs into the how did this happen at Soul Survivor? What was it about the culture that allowed this to go unchecked for so long?
It's complicated, right? You've got someone like Mike Pilavachi, incredibly charismatic, built this whole ministry from scratch.
Yeah.
To many, he was sole survivor.
Right, like he embodied it.
Exactly.
Especially for young people looking for, I don't know, direction, inspiration.
For sure. And the review suggests that this reverence for Pilavachi, this lack of formal structures, is what they call unchallenged power.
Okay, unchallenged power, that sounds a little ominous.
Yeah, think about it. Sole Survivor, as big as it was, operated with very little oversight, especially early on.
Really?
No real way to hold leadership accountable. No clear process for whistleblowing.
Mm.
Imagine a company, even a small one, with no HR department, no way to report issues.
That's chaos waiting to happen.
Right. And remember, for a long time, Sole Survivor Church, while kind of within the Church of England, wasn't officially under their authority.
Wait, what?
It wasn't until 2014 that they formally became part of the Church of England under the special agreement, a bishop's mission order.
So for almost 2 decades, Sole Survivor was this massive thing, tons of influence, and basically no one looking over their shoulder.
It's a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
and it speaks to this blind spot the report highlights.
Mm-hmm.
When you prioritize informal structures, personal relationships over clear accountability, things can go wrong.
It's interesting because the report brings up Sole Survivor's emphasis on close relationships.
Yeah,
Which you'd think on its face is a good thing, right?
of course, yeah.
But they're saying that actually might have been part of the problem.
It's nuanced, right? The review isn't saying close relationships are bad, but when those relationships get tangled up with power dynamics,
Right.
and there's this fear that speaking out will cost you your place in the group.
Things can get messy.
Exactly.
So it's like the same community, that closeness that drew people in, also made it harder to address any harmful behavior.
That's the point, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, it's lonely at the top, but maybe it was also lonely at the bottom, especially for those who felt like they couldn't speak up.
It's really sad to think about. And it makes you wonder, if people within Sole Survivor felt silenced, what about the Church of England itself? Were there any missed warning signs there?
The report doesn't shy away from that. It points out several instances where the church, especially the Diocese of St. Albans, could have been more, I don't know, proactive.
Like what?
Mike Pilavachi's ordination in 2012 is a big one. Becoming a priest is usually a long process, right? Discernment, examining your character, making sure you're fit for ministry. But with Pilavachi, it seems like they rushed it through.
Why would they do that?
It seems like his charisma, his success with young people, his established leadership, it might have led to a less thorough vetting.
So almost like they overlooked potential issues because of his success.
It's possible. And again, we see outward success potentially masking deeper problems. It's a cautionary tale for any organization, really.
Absolutely. But what happens now? What's next for Sole Survivor? For the Church of England?
The good news is the review offers solutions, lays out concrete recommendations for both, actually.
Okay, so there's a path forward.
There is. And those recommendations, they're worth really digging into.
Let's do it. We'll unpack those and what they mean for the future of, well, faith, really, in part 3 of our deep dive. So we've uncovered some really tough stuff.
Yeah.
But it seems like this review isn't about, like, destroying Sole Survivor.
No.
It's about using this whole awful experience to make some serious changes.
Right, like a wake-up call.
Exactly. So let's talk about those recommendations. What can actually be done to stop this from happening again?
Well, the review is pretty clear. Sole Survivor needs to completely overhaul its governance. We're talking formal accountability, clear whistleblowing procedures, training for staff and leadership on power dynamics, boundaries.
So no more of this, like, informal, we're all friends here kind of thing.
Right. It's time for some structure, some transparency.
Accountability, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just like changing the rules on paper. They need to create a culture where it's okay to question leadership, to challenge decisions.
From a culture of, like, blind loyalty to one where people feel empowered to speak up.
Exactly. Because staying silent, whether it's out of fear or loyalty or whatever, that just allows problems to fester.
It's like sweeping everything under the rug. Eventually, all just explodes.
And the report really emphasizes how important it is for everyone, no matter their position, to feel safe speaking up.
It makes you wonder, though, this isn't just a Sole Survivor problem, is it? This could happen anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Churches, schools, businesses, any organization.
Yeah.
This is a wake-up call for all of them. Charismatic leadership is great, but without safeguards, without ethical conduct,
It can go really wrong.
really wrong. So how do we empower leaders while also holding them accountable? How do we make sure success doesn't come at the expense of, well, basic human decency?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And there's no easy answer, no one-size-fits-all solution. But this review at least gives us a place to start.
Yeah.
Creating formal structures, having those difficult conversations about power, making sure everyone feels heard.
And making sure it's not just a one-time thing, right? It's got to be an ongoing process.
Totally. Constantly evaluating, improving, listening.
Mm.
It's about building a culture where everyone feels valued.
This has been a tough conversation, but an important one. So as we wrap up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
That we all have a responsibility. Whether we're part of a church or any kind of group, we need to pay attention to power dynamics, we need to speak up when something feels off, and we need to create spaces where people feel safe coming forward with concerns.
Perfectly said. This deep dive has been eye-opening and honestly a little heartbreaking. But it's a reminder that creating healthy, accountable, life-giving communities, it's a process. And it's a conversation we need to keep having. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.